Everything's changing in PR these days. So now what? Today, we're going to dive into the new power brokers of B2B, influencers. And we're not talking about the Instagram kind. They're the ones who actually move markets. Think of engineers or analysts or founders whose expertise shapes how industries buy and build and believe. Their influence isn't about reach, it's actually about credibility. And we'll explore how brands can work with these voices without turning every collaboration into a sponsorship. What type of influencers do you think that B2B brands should be trying to engage with, and what platforms can they be found on?
Even just the term influencers is so loosey-goosey in PR, and people have different understandings of what that means.
Mm-hmm.
Traditionally in something like a consumer public relations setting, an influencer you think of as a personality on a platform like Instagram or TikTok or YouTube who does sponsored content, basically. There's a exchange of funds and a script or topic developed, and that person is basically hawking your product.
Mm-hmm.
Think of it like product placement, commercial placement. It's more in the realm of advertising. For B2B PR, there are influencers, but they don't necessarily fall into that specific, I'm thinking of the OxyClean guy, kind of category, that they're just people who have developed an audience on a particular topic or in a particular industry that people use them and the media that they create as kind of a shorthand for testing the pulse of what they're interested in. We're all just overloaded by too much information all the time. So when I think of an influencer, I read the 404 Media newsletter to find out what's going on in policy and regulation in the tech industry and what some of the sticky issues are of the day. Or you read the MIT Tech newsletter to just look at what are the top stories in the world of technology, innovation, business, yada, yada, yada. That's one, like the people who produce those newsletters, for me, they're an influencer because they are encapsulating a subject matter that I'm interested in and bringing to my attention some of the top things that I should be aware of. That extends to other platforms as well. There's lots of people who post regularly on LinkedIn, a roundup of interesting talks at tech conferences or what VCs were discussing on their latest signal chat. Kind of insider information, but also tinged with a little bit of expertise and guidance and even provocation sometimes. So it depends on your industry. But, in general, for a B2B brand, you're looking at participating in platforms like LinkedIn.
Yep.
Because it has a specifically professional bent for the moment. But there are also a lot of other areas where it's worthy of focusing attention, like, say, for example, Substack.
That's a big one.
Yeah, really targeted information for a very specific audience. Podcasts are another one. There are podcasts that only deal with technology. There are podcasts that only deal with marketing. There are podcasts that try to condense where those two things intersect and discuss what's going on there. And there's plenty of opportunities to join those conversations where applicable. So I just think that we have to have a little more conservative view of what we consider an influencer of value when we're dealing with communications for, B2B purposes. It's like saying that this person is a thought leader or this person is an evangelist, this person is an influencer. It's like, well, anybody who has the ear of the person that you're trying to reach is an influencer. It's just that you have to be pretty rigorous about deciding whether or not it's worthy of pursuing that person's attention based on whatever the goals are for your business.
Yeah, you can really find influencers in any corner of the internet. So we've talked about where to find these people on the internet. Who are they?
Yeah.
Like, what kind of people are starting a Substack? What kind of people are branching out and creating a podcast.
Yeah. And which ones are worthy of paying attention to?
Yeah.
Because I can tell you everybody and their mother is starting a Substack. And last year they were all starting a podcast. That's the one thing. I don't want to give the impression that this isn't a viable communications area of expertise, because it actually is where those conversations are taking place of. And there really are people who are influential. I could give you an example. A lot of the people that I follow are former journalists who've
Yeah.
branched out on their own and created basically their own bully pulpit. They write, they do reporting. They also rely a lot on personal relationships from people that they used to work with or have interviewed in the past to further explore the issues that are interesting to them or the subject matter that's interesting to them without the constraints of, I have to compete with an editorial board. I only have 4 inches of column space. We're pivoting away from discussing these topics in our magazine or our outlet or on our YouTube channel even. So they are there. It takes a bit of research to find them. And this is why you hire an agency to spend those hours and hours of combing through. And it's not like you can just pick up some tool, a media monitoring tool like Muckrack or whatever to see what URLs are drawing the eyeballs. And those things are helpful, but a lot of it is actually just consuming the content and studying who's interacting with it and connecting the dots of when somebody gets mentioned on, the Dr. Volt's podcast, a couple of weeks later, maybe the guy who covers the EV industry for the information might be interested in that material. That there's a certain amount of what you're doing when you're engaging with these influencers on these new channels is kind of finding out where the people who talk about the big ideas of the day are finding their information. And there tends to be a kind of a loose network of those individuals, which has grown organically over many years. The trick for B2B communications is to find a way to enter into that network so that they think of you in those conversations, or you can ask the right people the right questions, or get noticed by somebody that you're trying to establish a partnership with. It's kind of a detective game, really.
Yeah.
But it takes a lot of time. That's one of the things that you think, I'll just throw this post up on LinkedIn, and if I build it, they will come. That only works in the movies.
Yeah, I agree that these opportunities, the non-traditional opportunities, can be a little bit more challenging to vet, but they also can, when they're really truly aligned, when they're the right audience, they can be as impactful or if not more than traditional media opportunities. But it's just about making sure that you're collaborating with the right.
Exactly, yeah. And then it becomes a virtual cycle.
Yes.
I can tell you that, we had a client who, it was just from a standard press release that we did, but it was a pretty technical press release about some, performance metrics of a certain tech. And we had distributed the press release in the standard way, Business Wire, and outreach to the appropriate journalists in both the verticals and the, national coverage and even international coverage where applicable. Somebody who I would consider a pretty prominent influencer in that particular industry saw the press release and just tweeted to company channel. This was several years ago when it was still Twitter. Hey, give me a call. This sounds interesting. And we were watching and we called and put them together, and it turned into a really a rich relationship of somebody who became a fan of the company and their technology. It served that influencer because he had has a YouTube channel that is it's a behemoth and a kind of a media enterprise in itself. Gave him interesting content and access to really something cutting edge and exciting, and gave exposure to our client to an audience who was already interested in being amazed by the next big thing in this particular industry. So it got them the attention of investors. It got them the attention of potential employees. It got them the attention of companies that they could form partnerships with to advance and scale and commercialize the technology that they developed. So, you know, it's like kismet when that happens.
Yes.
But you have to be available. You have to be monitoring. You have to be reaching out on these various platforms in order for that kind of serendipity to take place.
Mm-hmm.
And really, that's the trick, is where do you play? And that depends entirely on your business and your goals. The downside is with some of these new channels is that, yes, it's a huge audience, and yes, anybody can play. And whenever you have an open forum like that, you get not only people who are gaming the system, but also people who have very, very different goals in mind for their interactions with the rest of the world. And that can be incredibly distracting and can also be damaging to your brand. Get engaged in conversations that have absolutely nothing to do with what you're trying to communicate or the conversations that you want to be involved in. That's a tremendous waste of time. Because as I said, it does take a lot of time and thought to target where you want to place your communications campaigns. And I'm also thinking of just the money that's involved as well, because it's not trivial to have somebody mining these different platforms every day looking for the right opportunities. The last thing you want to do is to have that kind of effort blow up in your face with, a troll fight with someone who has nothing to do with your goals. So, which is why I don't want to say play it safe, but just be judicious in where you decide to spend your time on these platforms.
Yeah. And when you're vetting these influencers, sometimes it's more helpful to just ask people you know in the industry about them. Have you heard the name of this person? Like,
Yeah.
do you consume their content? Are the people you work with consuming the content? But that will often tell you more than what you can find on the internet about them.
Absolutely, yeah. And to not make assumptions too, because what I'm interested in won't necessarily be the same thing that a company's top engineer is interested in. And that is one of the things we do at Sterling all the time in our onboarding process, is actually talking to our clients and listening to them is like, well, where do you get your information? Who do you think is impressive? Why do you listen to this podcast? Do you follow a particular show on YouTube? Find out what's important to them and why. And then look at your own network and do exactly what you're talking about. Do some vetting and we do look at the media monitoring tools and whatnot and figure out, why is, this person trending right now? Why is everyone suddenly obsessed with these two dudes who sit at a fake news desk and just talk about tech deals for a couple of hours every morning? And then once you've discovered those, that's when you do the deep dive and decide, well, are they worth pursuing? And there's there's a certain amount of give and take that, you take your expertise in dealing with the broad and ever-changing media ecosystem. Almost always you have to educate your clients because there's a way that it appears to work and then there's the way that it really works. And it's our job to constantly be staying up to date on that. But then at the same time, because there's so much media and we're online all the time, what's important or what's most influential is constantly in flux. And that's why you've got to keep that conversation open with your clients, with your subject matter experts, with even their boots on the ground marketing people about what customers are asking, where we're seeing we have this one LinkedIn post and it got outrageous engagement from a segment that we hadn't even considered. So there's something there that we're talking about that is striking a nerve. Let's investigate that, and if it's the right opportunity, jump on it, pursue on it, get on the phone, call that guy who says call me. It really is at the end of the day, it's about making those personal connections, and then the connection with the broader audience follows that.
Yes. It's about making the most out of the relationships when you do connect with those influencers. Yeah. Like the relationship doesn't end after one interview, one collaboration. You should, continue to keep them updated about your business and make sure that you're supporting what they're doing as well.
You hit on a really, really important point that especially in B2B, it's reciprocal. At least with Sterling and what we do with our clients, we do not engage in as many paid placements just because they tend to be prohibitively expensive
Mm-hmm.
for business goals. You're dealing with very tight resources, so you
Mm-hmm.
want to get it right. If that being the case, that it's not just we're paying a service to make us like a commercial. What you are doing is you're helping each other, or you're talking about something
Mm-hmm.
going to draw attention to both of you and draw opportunity to both of you, or raise your cachet in a certain realm. Influence is all about people actually trusting what you say, or at least giving it consideration because you seem worthy of that consideration. So you don't just talk to someone once and then forget about them. Somebody follows you, you follow them. They have a big win, make sure that you say, hey, congratulations.
Mm-hmm.
They do a video that's on something interesting, even if it's not, particular benefit to your company. If it's something you found interesting, or you thought, wow, that was really well done, or I'd never considered it, say that and share that with your network. That it's conversation. And
Yes.
a conversation is what makes you present and available and creates opportunities for good business to happen.
Yeah. You want it to feel authentic and not promotional. Like one of our clients recently sat down with a Substack reporter who is in the clean tech space. He's highly respected journalist who's written for some like bigger name publications, and he branched out to create like his own podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and he was able to sit down with one of our client spokespeople for a conversation, and he was able to pick his brain as a subject matter expert, but then also allowed him to talk organically about their business and the interesting innovations that they have come up with recently and things that are coming in the future. He told us down the line that he went to Climate Week, and he was, hearing like in-person feedback from people there that really captured people's attention and their imagination. So I think the authenticity came through in that conversation, and that's why it resonated with people so much.
Yeah, and that it is. It's like I say, that virtuous cycle, because then the audience gets something interesting out of it. Whoever the influencer is, they get something interesting out of it, and our subject matter expert gets to talk about things that he's passionate about, and then going down the line, you get feedbacks like, okay, well, we have to put that on the schedule for next year. Maybe it's worthwhile to have a presence at Climate Week. There were people there
Yeah.
who were really interested in this. And yeah, it's not in our geography, but is it worth it to do it? Well, let's investigate that, because somebody who we respect has told us that they got feedback from a particular audience that we weren't pursuing. There are those real intelligence avenues that are very immediately available between influencers, audiences, communications professionals, and the companies and organizations that they represent. There is a very fast and fluid flow there that is worthwhile and shouldn't be ignored. All right, Sophia, I happen to know that for a lot of our clients, you are their social media goddess. What is one of the things that you think B2B brands in particular get wrong about influencers?
think hmm I think they might overlook the fact that they can hold the same weight as traditional media. I think um, it just, if you find that right aligned collaboration, it can be as impactful and gather as much attention as traditional media outlets. And I also think that they kind of sometimes it's more looked at as a one-time partnership, like we just need to get this one YouTube video done, or we just need to get in this newsletter one time, but the relationship shouldn't end at that first collaboration. And also the mileage that you get out of that collaboration shouldn't end there either. Like I know for our client that collaborated with the technology YouTuber, that third party endorsement has been really, really essential in award applications or demonstrating their credibility when they're in a briefing with a journalist. Like they're able to bring up, hey, we worked with this YouTuber. And immediately I've seen journalists react to that, and they have this level of trust that happens immediately just because of that third party endorsement.
Sometimes a YouTuber is actually the most important thinker on this particular issue this week. And yeah, you should be paying attention to them. And like you're saying, the eyes light up because it's almost like a personal connection. It's not a personal connection, but it's almost like one.
Well, and with some waning trust in traditional media, when people feel like they're hearing from one individual voice versus a larger publication, a lot of times they find that easier to trust and easier to believe. I think one thing I appreciate a lot about these B2B influencers is the focus and the niching down of their content. Like,
Yeah.
what,
And to a degree, I mean, I don't want to make any grand pronouncements, but to a degree, it really is more pure
Mhm.
than what's out there in the consumer world. And that I can tell you, as a professional who works in this realm, that can be a sweet, sweet relief during the workday, is that there are a lot more people who are genuine and authentic and upfront and really, like you say, focused on their area of specialty, an area of interest, and genuinely just upfront and kind about it.
Yeah.
And that makes for a much more pleasant working environment.
Yeah. I think I think of like one of my favorite Substacks that I subscribe to is a battery technology newsletter. This run by a former battery analyst, and he's only in my inbox once a week, and it's
Yeah.
always useful. It's
Yeah. And you're like, oh, thanks. That is exactly, I didn't know that. And thanks
yeah,
for sharing. That is a very pleasant feeling to have.
yes, it's kind of a relief. It's like, okay, here's the most important story of the week. Here's a few other headlines you need to know. I'll see you next week.
Thank you very much.
It's an important thing to ask yourself when you're working with any influencer. What's the end goal? How does this serve my business? How does this serve their audience?
Right.
Does it feel aligned? Does it feel like a what's the word? Synergistic partnership?
Yes. Synergy. I remember.
Synergy!
It's about making connections. So go where you can make those connections and let people help you get there.
Create community in your business niche. That's what
Yeah.
it's all about.
It sounds all squishy, but actually it's not. That's like how things get built. That's how things get done.